What's up, folks? Welcome to Youth Night. We're on, what is it? Monday, June 8th, 2020. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. As you guys are logging in, just welcome. Hope you guys got a drink, got some food, and ready to get going. A couple things to keep in mind as our school year wraps up. Tonight is the last night for 8th graders to be in 8th grade. So next Monday, you will be moving up to high school group. That means middle school group, you will get a bunch of new 6th graders next Monday night. So we've got the 8th, we've got the 15th, that's the next week, where we've got a bunch of new people moving up, and then we've got the 22nd. After that, we will take a good break and give our leaders a break. I will turn off my phone and take my own break, and we'll be able to miss each other even more than we're already missing each other, right? But we will hopefully get out of this Zoom fatigue. So just to clarify, just to reiterate, for those of you guys who are still hopping on, we got tonight. Next week, 5th graders are moving up to 6th grade. 8th graders, next Monday night, you are joining high school group. Seniors, you guys are allowed to stay until you go to college, really. That's totally up to you. We can talk that through. And then, so we've got the 15th, and then the 22nd will be our last Monday night until we take a summer break. So make sure you write that down. We'll have some things over summer, but we typically take it pretty chill over summer. So we will be working through a couple options, especially as we get into we're in phase 1.5 right now, and hopefully I read on I think the Seattle Times that we could be going into phase 2 in a couple weeks. So that gives us some options. So, if you're just logging on, welcome to Youth Night. We're going to get things rolling. What we're doing tonight, we've got 2 more senior sessions. So if you're with us 3 weeks ago, because 2 weeks ago was Memorial Day weekend, so we took that Monday off. And last week we discussed a lot of the events and responses around the George Floyd killing and the ensuing protests and riots. So this week we are hopping back in to the final 2 senior sessions. These were recorded about a month ago now, but still relevant. First one's a little longer. The second one is going to be really short, and then I'll hop in between. We got one life update that Lizzie Dean wanted to share with us. So here we go, Lizzie. Why don't you share?
Hey guys! Life update for me is our family just got a new addition. This is our kitten, our girl kitten. We don't have a name yet, but we are very excited for her to join our family, and we're hoping she likes us. But yeah, that's our kitten.
Thanks for sharing, Lizzie. Lizzie, it sounds like you guys just got the cat. So Lizzie, just a couple hours ago, was like, can I share this? So thank you, Lizzie, for getting me that in time. Really appreciate that. And that's always fun. Cat's super cute. Okay, well, we're going to hop into tonight's first senior session. So let me pray for us, and then we will get going. God, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for this ability for us to gather in this manner. I pray that you would teach us through the experience, the good and the bad, the successes and the failures of our seniors. Would you allow them to speak to their younger peers and their leaders, and myself included. Allow us to hear more about you and just some wisdom for especially our new 8th graders jumping into high school next year. And then, as we all just continue to walk this tricky season of life as teenagers, figuring out who we are and what it looks like to follow you. So teach us tonight, God, we ask in your name. Amen. All right, senior sessions, part 3. Here we go. Maybe. Oh, man, what's going on? Hold on. Big failure. Now we want to talk, and no, that sucks. You got no idea how many times I do that on when I film some stuff for Monday night. Like, why did I say that? Okay, now we want to take some time and hear about your guys' faith journey and just hear some of your insight in that regard. So Let's start off with an easy one. What's one of your favorite memories of your time in SEY, in Soma Eastside Youth?
Being baptized.
Why are you laughing? Do I need to redo that again?
No. I was just like, all the memories just came flooding in, you know?
I have like these like flashbacks of all the stupid things I've witnessed. So
Oh, all the things I've witnessed. John, you had a real one. You said,
Getting baptized.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Sorry, what was that?
Why was that one of your favorite moments?
Cause that I always been like, oh yeah, I'm a Jesus follower, but that was when I told the world. I was unashamed of it. That was a big step in my faith. I seriously think the first winter escape and like then when we actually first started getting youth nights, because we kind of knew all each other like in church, like us, the older kids that came before us, but
Yeah.
I actually started to create friendships, especially with the grade with Elena and Liv, and then the grade below me. A lot more, not as much the sophomore and freshman, but
yeah,
I definitely like. Yeah, Liv and I and Elena and I are good friends now.
Yeah. You say the first winter escape?
Summer.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't think.
Yeah, I was like,
winter escape.
Winter Escape was Sambika.
Well, that wasn't called winter escape.
Yeah. That was like the last before you started.
Yeah. That was before I became the new dad.
Yeah.
Okay. That was weird. Okay. Yeah, let's cut that. Let's go. Let's do this again. John, I'm sorry. We're gonna redo that.
Interesting.
that was great.
Well, I've heard so many jokes before, like, you're not my dad. Or, that was before mom married you. Or, yeah, I've heard those jokes. I honestly think Carolyn's made that joke at me or something like that. Like,
Probably. Sounds like her.
yeah, of like, you weren't our dad then.
You weren't our dad.
Stefan was our dad.
Definitely was. Okay. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, now we're going to take some time. Elena, your face. Face was like this. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to take some time and we want to hear about your guys' faith journey while in middle school and high school. So let's start off with an easy one. What's one of your highlights or favorite memories of being involved in Soma Eastside Youth?
So you go.
Go for it.
Okay, well, I'll just say something then, just so we make sure. Getting baptized for sure.
Okay.
And started having a youth night because a lot of stuff, especially in wintertime, we just bonded especially with the more as a unit instead of all these individual people from all these schools all over. So
yeah,
that was definitely cool.
You said in wintertime again.
Summer.
No, no, the Christmas things were fun, but
oh, I get what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh,
but in addition to that, the first escape trip
yeah.
to
Escape 2018.
Yeah.
Escape to Spokane.
Escape to
Spokane and what is that city in Idaho? Coeur d'Alene. Yeah. That one city in Idaho. What about you guys?
Going back to like the first like official escape back in summer in Spokane. I think we all really bonded once again as a unit, as John said. Like, I don't know, it was just fun to like not only serve together, but to like do activities together and build relationships and get to know people personally on a much deeper level. So
yeah.
Oh, and we had Bethany as our leader, and we got the golden
golden plunger.
We still own it. Still ours.
John was
Still
the lone
ours.
high school guy with 7th grade Colby and Tyler and then Ethan too, huh? That was the core 4. Yeah. And Drake had just dropped a really sick album that summer, and so all those videos. I still picture you on the little horse, the little animatronic horse thing in the mall.
Oh my gosh.
see
Didn't
that.
someone break that?
What?
A
Did
pregnancy
someone like
killer.
break a dog or something and they got mad?
That was where the Elena was birthed.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because you
Yeah.
said that you thought that was funny, and so me and Gracie made the video for it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Johnny got yelled at by a cop.
Yeah,
You got
put
what?
me in handcuffs.
What?
That's
Yeah.
not
He like started to.
Fuck.
And he's like, oh, I'm just kidding.
Oh no.
everything is coming out
It's
right
like,
now.
what?
It's hopefully
Yeah, that's kind of legendary. Getting in handcuffs on a Christian youth trip.
What did you do? Oh my gosh.
Didn't you break the puppy thing?
I didn't break it, but he pretended like I did. So he was like, oh, I'm going to take you to
This
confinement.
was at the mall for the video
Yeah.
scavenger hunt?
Yeah.
Oh wow. I
Yeah.
just
know
Right after
about
my
this.
pregnancy pillow test.
pregnancy
Oh, yeah.
pillow was super
Oh,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah, that one was great.
Oh my God.
Elena, what about you?
We all keep saying the same thing, but I really liked the first escape too. It was
Oh,
like,
do something different. Do something different.
okay,
Hey, fuck
Didn't know we aren't allowed to share the same common interests.
You can't like the same thing.
the summer like LGBTQ study was really cool, like hearing about the different like perspectives and like bonding as like a youth group on something different than something we normally study. So that was really cool. And
Yeah.
like doing stuff in the summertime, because we can't always do that. Was in the summertime, right?
That was last
Yes.
period. Yeah.
Yeah, so like
Fair
because we
enough.
don't usually do stuff in the summertime, so it was fun like still
Right.
seeing people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though we were talking some heavy personal stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. What about this? You guys all lost the finish line of your senior year. What do you think God's been teaching you in this time? Potentially even the beginning of your freshman year of college is still on the table. I mean, who
Let's have some
knows?
hope here.
Let's hope not. But yeah, what do you think? Just losing all this stuff, you might still get a graduation, but who knows? Yeah, what do you think God's been trying to teach you in this time?
How valuable, I can't say that word,
Oh, that's a word, valuable. Yeah.
but I can't pronounce it properly.
Okay.
How important all your friendships and relationships are with people who aren't your immediate family.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like pretty basic, but like not being able to hang out with your friends, you know, your last few months of your senior year, not being able to make those memories like you would be able to.
Yeah.
Kind of just shows how fast it can be taken away from you and how you can just take it for granted. So I think God's trying to teach me, like, don't take your relationships and your friendships for granted, because they could be taken away from you so fast.
I
What
think
about you guys? What do you think God's been trying to teach you in this season of experiencing loss?
I think it shows like where my priorities were. Like I was like my boyfriend and prom and it's best year of my life, instead of like where's God and what am I doing to like enrich or further my faith. And also like the thing we learned winter escape, like slowing down, like
Yeah.
we literally have to. So like we were just like forcing it, like, okay, we're pushing you in, like
Yeah.
you can do this now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I felt that big. Yeah, it was kind of weird that we did a season of spiritual practices and slowing our pace and limiting our commitments, and then God took it another level and was like, "Hey, okay, so I'm just gonna like stop the world."
Yep.
So what excuse do you have for not being with me? And yet, some of us have gotten more busy, right now. The school district has just slammed you guys, some of you. So.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 25 minutes, so
It's insane.
What? It's supposed to be 25 minutes. Okay.
yeah,
Well,
it's supposed to be 25 minutes per day, but
for class.
that might be per class.
yeah, it's per class. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, got some students saying, well, they just might be throwing their excuses to get out of money.
Okay, but they could have like a 25-minute like lesson plan, but then you have to do like homework after. So then it just like
And then like the 4 other assignments that are assigned for that day.
Yeah. Also, okay, so feel God teaching you to, just reassess your priorities, see how you were living potentially for other things were more important for you rather than God. Does that sound about right? Yeah, I can feel that now. But at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, God, I think I got it, but maybe
Good
not.
one.
Maybe Washington hasn't gotten it yet. I don't know.
Skip this process, please.
And then maybe the fact that we're literally saying that, maybe he's like, okay, I don't think you get it.
So how about 2 more years?
Yeah, let's keep this. It's kind of like when you go to your mom and dad when you're a little kid and you like did something wrong. You're like, I'm sorry I did that. Can I get this back now? And it's like, okay, you don't
Nope.
realize that you're not really sorry. You're just saying it to get your toy back. Anyways, not to say that your friends are your toy. Anyways, bad illustration. John, what about you, man? You had some interesting thoughts early on when we were texting about this, but we're a few weeks past that. What do you feel God's been teaching you in this time?
It definitely hurt. I'm not gonna lie. Like
Yeah.
it's
You lost baseball
yeah, and
last year. Yeah.
senior year, we got third in state last year. We were supposed to win it all. Our team was like we've been saying this is our year since we were 9.
Yeah.
Um,
You guys all grew up together. You came up together.
yeah,
And this is the big year.
yeah, the year, and it just gets stripped, and all these fun social kind of last oorah stuff. I mean, a lot of it is what Liv and Elena have already said. Just don't take anything for granted. Like I went on a bike ride a couple of days ago, and I ran into some kids from my high school, and I talked to them for like 2 hours just because it was.
Yeah. Did you guys like weep in seeing each other? You're just like,
Yes.
Ew.
Just
Oh my gosh.
joy to see some of my classmates who,
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna, like we already talked about school, but like I met a couple, or I became close with a couple of them this year, and it was just nice to see them again. And
Yeah.
we didn't get that last like congratulations celebrating everything, and then everybody's kind of,
Yeah.
which is sad. But I mean, it definitely a priority check because I like sports. That's been interfering with my accessibility to youth for a long time. My personal like just want to like experience those things. I was putting God kind of in the back seat and ready to take these or the 6 months leading up to college.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't take anything for granted, and make sure your priorities are set.
That's good. The more you've grown in your faith in Jesus, how has that changed the view of yourself, your identity, how you view yourself, how you perceive yourself in life? How has that over the last few years evolved?
Learning to truly trust God. 100%. Because like I was just saying, all that the last 6 months of me here were gonna be legendary and are big mementos in my life, and he took them away, and there's nothing I can do except to say, okay, I trust you, and moving forward and working to something else.
What about you girls? How have you how's your identity or perception evolved, changed as you've followed Jesus these few years?
Well, I like didn't always want to go to like a Christian college. Like I didn't want like rules and like more things standing in the way of my freedom, you know me.
Yeah.
Bad with authority. But like growing in my faith, like this year I was like, I want to learn more. Like I want to be in a community of people that are like love God as much as I do to help me grow my faith. So now I'm going to a Christian college, and I also didn't think I needed like Christian friends. You know, like most of my friends are not Christian, but like growing into my faith more, I was like, I want people that I can talk to that have like the same values as me, that can like give me advice based on like our faith and not just based on like whatever makes you happy, bro, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I feel like it's also helped me with like not worrying as much as what people think of me, because I know that like God loves me, and that's what I should be worried about, not what other random teenagers think. So yeah,
that's good. Liv, anything to add?
Kind of stemming off of Elena's, I have learned to just accept the fact that I need God. I kind of like being in control of my life and doing what I want to do.
Right.
And I don't like to admit it, but I need him. And once again, stemming off of Elena again, like I didn't picture myself going to a Christian college because I didn't necessarily want, once again, another thing to be in the way or to control me. But I'm starting to see that I like do need God, and I will always need God. There won't be a time where I don't need him. So yeah.
I've definitely learned like how important it is to surround yourself with Christian people. Because you become your friends. So
yeah,
none of my friend group or outside of church, at least, is, I mean, they claim they are, but they don't practice it. But like my true Christian friends are in this like youth group and community. So
yeah, that was my next question. Yeah, how valuable has it been to be a part of your local church, and even more so SEY?
So important. Like I've like some of my best friends are like from that I met through the youth group, and like you just make so much deeper relationships, especially like not even with like just teenagers, but like with your leaders, and like you build like a trusting community that will always be there for you and will lead you even more into what God wants for you.
And I think with having Christian friends and being a part of this like youth community is like you get to not only build relationships with them like personally, but also on that deeper spiritual level. So if like you're reaching all the bases of your life with these friends you make in the youth.
That's good. Last one for this section on your faith. 10 years from now, looking back, what do you think will be one thing from Soma Eastside Youth that shaped you, your faith, or that you took away? I know I've got one thing. I'm about 10 years removed. I'm 12 years removed from high school. And so, yeah, I've got about one or two things that my youth pastor really, and my group's leaders and stuff like that I really took. So, yeah, what do you think is one thing that's impacted you the most and will really help shape and set you up for the rest of your life? That's a big one.
I think one thing that will definitely shape the rest of my life, not like look back on and see, would be like, this is what a good community of friends and relationships look like. And I think in the future, I am going to probably strive for a community of friends that I have now with the church, with the family that I have with the church.
Yeah. Community's vital. We're made for each other. Yeah. We need each other. That's good. What about you two?
It's like a big question. Like,
It is. And it's probably not fair because you're not 10 years down the line. But
yeah.
I mean,
Probably like joining the worship team. Because it's like given me like sort of kind of like a place in the church, you know, like I'm not just there to serve God through like worship and like sitting in the services, but now I'm like actually serving for the church. And yeah.
That's good.
I don't know how to add to that.
I think over the last few months when we've talked, sounds like you've realized that being a Jesus follower doesn't mean being like a spectator in the stands, like at Century League watching the Hawks play or something. It's like, no, like God wants us on the field, in the game. And even as we're talking in Acts right now, you know, that, you know, we're called to be his witnesses, and we have a part, and we're parts of his body, and we're all needed to and invited to partake in his mission. So that's cool. That's great. What about you, John?
Say the importance of the community for sure. Just there's some stories, or like when I have a meeting with you, which I mean we haven't had one in a while just because of Rona, but sometimes it's like exactly what I need to hear. And if you go seek an answer, you will find one. And sometimes God serves it on a silver platter, and sometimes he hides it in messages, and just learning to recognize certain signs to how to continue or move forward with whatever situation or you're in. I think that's, and just growing and becoming more spiritually aware. Like I nowhere near perfect, but from freshman year to where I am now, and to where I hopefully can be, and want to become like so aware spiritually and knowledgeable and wise in that.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Okay. Well, thank you, seniors, for part 3. We got one more part coming right after this. But I did want to take a quick intermission before we get into the last part that's only a couple minutes long. Before we go into that final session, which, like I said, is fairly short, I did want to continue to keep before us the events surrounding the killing of George Floyd and the ensuing protests and riots that have now really turned global, if you've been keeping an eye on the news. 3 points I want to give you. 1, if you missed last week, please make time this week to go watch last week's video on our Soma Eastside Youth YouTube channel. Take time to watch that entire video. There's a message from Aaron and Mai's old pastor from when we were, this is the church that I came to faith in at the end of my senior year. I used to go to middle school youth night there, and that's where the Escape was actually birthed. I stole the name and the method from them. And so that's where Scott Treadway actually was one of the founders of the Escape. And so he's now the lead pastor at this really great church in Southern California, in the heart of Southern California. And he's a pastor there. So check out that. He talks through and gives us a good word in regards to what's going on right now. And then there's also a long interview with Gracie and I about an experience she had about a year ago in North Bend with the Snoqualmie Police Department. And so I encourage you to check that out. Well, you can hear a long-form interview there talking through what that was like for her, and her and I kind of go back and forth. If you want to hear a shorter version of that story, I posted it on my Instagram account today and my Facebook page. It was also featured in yesterday's Sunday morning service for Soma. So you can check out that account. The one from yesterday that's posted on Instagram and Facebook has Aaron and myself sharing our own experiences as well as a parent viewing our daughter getting handcuffed for being an alleged shoplifter. So she was not, but check it out and just hear her story. Number 2, I do want to say this. As followers of Jesus, we condemn murder in any manner. Murder is never okay. It's never in line with the way of Jesus. In this particular instance, we condemn the unjust killing of a black civilian by a police officer. We also acknowledge that this is not an isolated incident. We lastly also ought to support and partake in protesting to seek and ensure that all sisters and brothers made in God's image are treated with dignity. We acknowledge that the foundation of our nation was built on slavery and theft, robbing people of their land and their humanity. From then, as Pastor Paul said yesterday, America has in many ways been the author of its own misery. While peaceful protests evolving into violent riots and looting are not in step with following Jesus, we also can understand that when it gets to this point, we as Jesus followers need to be slow to speak and instead quick to listen and ask questions in genuine humility. How did it get to this situation? How did these people get to this point feeling like this is the only way their voice can be heard? Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said this about 50 years ago, commenting on protests that turned into riots. Even though he was an advocate for peaceful protests, he made this acknowledgement. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. That's key. If we're going to condemn riots, condemn the systematic injustices that are provoking and leading to those riots. The reality is the riots are an overflow of the deeper problem, the deeper problems that have been happening and are rooted in 400 years of history in this country. And you may say, our country's not that old. Yeah, it's from when we first landed here and began paving our way. King continues, but in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. A riot is the language of the unheard. We as Christians should be asking, what has forced these people to get to a point, this whole community of people, to get to a point where they feel they cannot be heard, that they cannot be seen, they are not acknowledged by their land. He continues, and what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. I acknowledge we don't use that term Negro anymore, but the black person, the black poor, has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. So we don't acknowledge privilege for some and inequality for others. We're not even willing to acknowledge that. And he says, and it has failed to hear the large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. Today, we're more concerned with our comfort, our social media status, our pleasure, our own activities and such at the expense of justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. I love that poetry there. And King concludes, as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. The prophet himself, right? Nothing's changed. Things have changed, yes, but not much. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. If you are outraged by riots, realize that the only way we prevent that is seeking social justice and progress, standing up for those who are overlooked and oppressed. The last thing I want to give you guys, the third point in regards to the killing of George Floyd and the ensuing protests and riots, I want to recommend to you to seek to understand more. I know learning is not always the coolest thing, but man, it is one of the most loving things. Education is one of the best ways we can seek to love someone else. Learning about someone else's human experience is one of the best ways we can love someone that is different than us. And that's really Jesus, right? Like Jesus literally took the time to step out of his shoes, on his heavenly throne. This is Philippians 2 stuff, that he took that time to step out of his place of heavenly, godly, divine, just enjoying that up there, wherever he was, whatever that looks like, I don't know. but he took his time. He denied that, and he said, I'm going to go step in their shoes. That's one of the main ways he showed us his love for humanity and all of creation. So if we want to follow Jesus and love like Jesus, we ought to seek to learn the experiences of those who are overlooked and oppressed by society. So I've got a few recommendations for you. One of the main things is what you consume culture-wise. Books, movies, TV, and such. One note before I give you some actual recommendations, and then we'll wrap up the night. One note I want to share is there's this show, unfortunately a lot of the stuff I'm going to point out is TVMA or rated R, and so these all require parental permissions, and so I completely defer to them. But there's a show, Master of None. I don't recommend the show, but it brought up this topic. Aziz Ansari, so Tom Habestraf from Parks and Rec, it's his show on Netflix, and he discusses how in the late 80s and early 90s, Eddie Murphy, some of you guys may know him as Donkey from Shrek. He's done far greater things, but he was the biggest movie star, one of the biggest movie stars at that point. And Eddie Murphy was not allowed to kiss someone on film. It was just a known rule. He didn't kiss anyone in that time. Why? Because a black person was not allowed to be the main subject of a love interest at that point. It just wasn't a thing in a popular film. And so that's eventually when we get these black family sitcoms like Fresh Prince. I mean, these had been going on for decades, but every generation kind of has their own. We had Fresh Prince, we had Family Matters growing up from my generation. It was a big deal that my favorite show, Boy Meets World, had a love interest for a black love interest for a white girl. That was huge in the late 90s for us. But yeah, there even now, shows like Blackish and Grownish, they tend to be separated. Now more and more there's movies that are giving love interests, allowing people of color to be one of the two love interests. I don't know a lot of movies that both of the main characters are people of color, the two love interests. Usually one of them has to be white. That's interesting. That should give us cause for pause. Why is that? What does that teach us when we go through a generation of consuming culture where we don't see love interests that involve two people that are not white? It's just an interesting thing that we should observe. This is stuff we talked about back in our Pop Jesus series a few years ago, of how Christians should try and view culture through the lens of Jesus. This is where we talk about systemic stuff. And these are things that people don't even realize. I didn't realize it until I watched that Masters of None episode. And so one of the things I want to recommend to you, yes, seek to consume culture that is diverse, but also seek to watch some of the stuff and read some of the stuff that's a little hard, but for the sake of learning other people's experiences. So I want to give you there's a couple book examples, and then I'm going to give you some shows and movies. One, Martin Luther King Jr. book, Strength to Love. Check out this book. If you ever want to borrow a book from me, you can. Some people have done that. Just text me. But this is pretty easy. This is in the library. You can order this off of Amazon. I think it's $10. It's got a lot of his famous sermons and messages, but also some stuff that, it's still very culturally relevant today. One of my favorite pieces of writing in here is his fictional letter of Paul to the American church. And so remember, Paul in the New Testament, he's writing to most of the smaller letters in the New Testament are letters from Paul to certain churches. Well, he writes a fictional letter of, if Paul were around today, in the 20th century, what would he have written to the church in America regarding racism and inequality? And so I recommend that. Check out Dr. King. Don't just benefit from his day off. Actually read him. Don't just read quotes. Please don't. Please, let's not be those Christians. Let's actually read and honor a brother, a prophet in the faith, who a lot of us reap benefits from. The other one I want to give you is a book called The Myth of Equality, The Myth of Equality by Ken Weitzema. This is a little denser. It's got a little bit of history, a little bit of sociology for those of you guys who are a little bit more into that. And then it gets into, this is again another Christian perspective, but this is a scholar talking through these things of how there's systemic inequality, and that just because the civil rights happened, just because slavery ended, does not mean equality has manifested. The reality is until kingdom come, until heaven is finally here, we should expect that things are not going to be perfect. We should always be seeking to improve and acknowledge we believe in sin. We believe that in a doctrine called total depravity, that life, that evil dwells and flourishes in this world. And so we should be quick as Christians to acknowledge, oh yeah, that makes sense. Things are probably messed up. Let's talk about it. Let's learn. Another one I'll give you, Eric Mason, he's from Acts 29, our church planting network that we're a part of. It's called Woke Church. This is another great book. It's a little easier to read than The Myth of Equality. But E-Mace is a really cool pastor from Philadelphia. Woke Church, Eric Mason. The last one I'll give you, if you are into history, I think guys like Ethan Hare really like history. There's a book, I don't keep my sleeve jackets, but there's a book called The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby, The Color of Compromise. This goes through the church's, the American church's complicity in racism and walks through the history of it. It's really in depth. This guy's a scholar in American church history, and he's another Christian brother. I check him out. Really helpful stuff. Just came out, I think, a year or two ago. And then in regards to watching stuff, I'd recommend checking out Jamar's. So this one's actually, I think every single recommendation except one is you've got to ask your parents. But Jamar's book also has a 10-episode, like 20-minute episodes. They're kind of like documentary-esque, called The Color of Compromise on Amazon Prime. It's free if you've got Prime Video. You can check them out. I think it's considered TVMA because sometimes they have some explicit images in regards to some of the abuses and stuff that, and a little more explicit as to what happened and people have endured. But it traces through American history and it starts from the beginning. I checked that out. Man, a 20-minute episode is huge. There's 10 eps, I think. That guy's awesome. I recommend checking out 13th, the documentary on Netflix. Discusses how when slavery was abolished, we just moved to, instead of enslaving people, we moved to starting to put people in prison. And then in prisons, we can utilize people in ways we don't have to pay them fair wage. Instead, we can utilize them as workers. And so in a sense, we're using them as slave laborers to produce goods. It's an interesting thing, especially in regards to private prisons where they became a business rather than just a place that the government kind of oversees. And so people make money off of imprisoning people. That's an interesting documentary. I recommend checking that out. Again, it's TVMA. So you've got to ask mom and or dad, but check that one out. And that's got people on both sides of the aisle, all over the political spectrum involved, talking through what this did in our country, how we moved to that. Other movie, Selma, but it's the account of Martin Luther King Jr. It's a snapshot of something that happened, a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. Selma, Alabama is one of the pivotal places in the advancement of civil rights. And so, again, that's a rated R movie. There's a couple pretty hard scenes to watch. If you can't handle that, it's totally okay. I encourage you, though, I'm going to nudge you. I'm not going to push you, but I'm going to nudge you. If you're like, I don't really like, I get that. Talk it through with your folks. Sometimes, I don't enjoy watching people get hurt. But sometimes we need to see that, Sometimes it's powerful to see it. Just like when an album drops that is like really recounting a tough story. I think of some of Kendrick Lamar's albums where he just goes through his experience as a black man in LA. It's powerful when you first take it in, whether through ears or watching it visually. So I recommend checking out Selma. I haven't watched Just Mercy yet. I haven't also read Just Mercy, although Aaron really liked that book. That's another, I believe it's rated R as well. That's apparently streaming free on all platforms this month. Warner Brothers did that for us to check out. And my favorite one, it's a little more fun. This is the only PG-13 one. Remember the Titans. It's sort of fun, but it's also a tough thing, but talks through. It's based on a true story. It's not entirely a true story. But I think just if you're wanting to get into, if you maybe more middle schoolers, if you've never seen anything, a movie that talks through some of these things, that's a great movie to help you get started in seeing some of the discrimination that some people have faced in our country over time. So did want to give you that. So those are our three things. Check out the video. It's our comments on condemning the killing of George Floyd and also acknowledging we need to educate ourselves. I've given this example to a few of you this week as we've engaged in conversations. It's a bummer that I see on social media a lot, that Christians seem to be quick to bring a scalpel to someone who is mourning rather than a tissue. We approach them with the scalpel. They're grieving, they're going through this thing. They felt this deep mourning after something happened. The killing of George Floyd is something that most people of color can relate with. I mean, it hurts. It deeply hurts. And so, but for Christians of all people to be the ones, it seems like, generally speaking, coming to the conversation, responding with a scalpel, coming to dissect, coming to give an autopsy of whether or not their feelings are valid, that's not the way of Jesus, friends. That's not the way of Jesus. You look at the Gospels, and man, when someone is mourning, Jesus is not like, when the widow loses her son, Jesus is not like, well, what was his diet like? Maybe he had pre-existing conditions. Maybe he wasn't eating properly, and so he was obese, and he had this coming. Like, Jesus didn't no. Jesus mourns. Jesus has compassion on her. And so we too ought to be people that, man, when someone's grieving, I don't know about you, but if I'm hurting in that moment, and probably for a few days and weeks, guess what? Don't come at me trying to dissect what's going on. Instead, let's be people who bring tissues. Let's be people who listen. And so I'll wrap this up as we head into, I'm going to play one video before we get into the last senior session. But I will say this. Oh, yeah, let's play this video. This is one video that helps us. This was going around on social media this week, and I found this to be super helpful. You're saying, man, I just don't see it. It makes sense that we don't see it. If you look at Issaquah, we're 3% black. We've got about 1,000 black people in our city, according to city data. If you look at Sammamish, you've got about 400 black people in your city compared to 40,000. You're less than 1% black. Most of us may not actually have a black person in our regular day life. The fact that when we walk around our city, they stand out, that should tell us that they're just not in our life. Whereas in the country as a whole is a lot more diverse than our communities, whether it be Mexican or Asian or, of any sort. And so this video right here is going to be helpful for us. It explains systematic racism. The video is geared towards helping kids understand it. But I find that videos like this, like the Bible Project, are super helpful in allowing us to get a tiny grasp on a much more intricate problem. Here we go.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, An investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
I love the implicit bias example for white people was white people can't dance. I'm like, Ellie and Beppy are like awesome dancers. Ellie posts cool videos all the time, how good she is. So, man, just to wrap that up, man, we as Jesus followers ought to be the people who are first to offer a hug and a listening ear to those who are oppressed and overlooked by society, and in particular for centuries. We as Jesus followers ought to be people who stand up for those who are oppressed and ostracized by society. We as Jesus followers ought to be able to say Black Lives Matter. And we as Jesus followers ought to be able to stand up and say, we're not going to be okay with this. We're going to figure out what we can do in the unique ways that God's gifted us to utilize our voice, our gifts, our passions, our skills in whatever way to continue to be a part of bringing God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. And so with that being said, we're going to watch the last senior sessions video, and then we'll head to groups.
3, 2. Okay, last section. We just want to hear about your guys' future and then some final words. So, yeah, you guys have been in youth ministry for roughly 7 years. Yeah, it's been a long time. But yeah, we've been together for only a couple, you and me. But so how have your aspirations, your future hopes, maybe changed or evolved over your years in youth ministry, if at all? Yeah, how has your strivings in life changed or evolved?
Well, I already talked about this, but like I would not have seen myself like at a Christian college a long time ago. So
Yeah.
changing my values to be more God-centered so that I got myself to like go to a Christian college.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would say my mindset towards life and everything else, because I just got my freshman letter back again, and I cared about pretty much everything earthly.
Okay.
And now it's like that is just dumb. I don't get satisfaction. Like they're nice to have, but it's just temporary, and that's not really what's important in life.
Yeah.
So definitely becoming like, oh, like do this, this, and this because God said so, and continuing the deep in faith.
Okay. What about you, Liv?
Maybe a combination of both what John and Elena said. I feel like my values and my mindset have just completely changed. I didn't see myself going to a Christian college either. And I also just have a different outlook on life and a different way of pursuing and going deeper into my faith than I did, 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we just finished, you two, Elena and Liv, our leader book. Yeah, what's the purpose of life now?
Don't waste it on stupid things.
Oh, that's not what is the purpose. That's what's not the purpose.
Us live for God and serve Him in all the ways that you can, pretty much.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. Okay, final words. What's one thing you want to encourage your younger peers in Soma Eastside Youth with? You've got your junior friends who are potentially looking at their senior year being minimized or online as well, or aspects of it, all the way down to sixth graders. What would you advise them with? One thing.
Don't get caught up in like the world. Like, have a community and friends that keep like your priorities straight and help you further your journey, and not like get distracted by all the stupid stuff that's happening around you.
Yeah. Okay.
Enjoy it all.
Yeah.
Like even the small coffee dates you do with your dad, or going out with your friends to get food. Like, enjoy it all, really. Like, you're gonna look back and wish you had more days like that.
Yeah.
So just absorb it.
Yeah.
It's okay to be yourself and have your own values. Because all my friends, they're doing ungodly stuff, and I'm kind of the white sheep or black sheep in that situation.
Yeah.
So they're not like the best influence with that, but like I know that I'm a follower in God, and no, my body's my temple, so I'm not going to partake in that stuff. But
it's okay to be different.
What was that?
It's okay to be different is what I hear you saying.
Yeah. Definitely. And don't strive to be ordinary. Ooh. Like nobody's going to be perfect, but you can be the best you that you can be. And I think that's huge once you kind of figure out yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for making the time to do this interview. Hopefully when I click stop recording, it says it's saved. We don't have to do this all over again. No, you're like, what? But no, yeah, thank you for making the time right now. I know another Zoom call is just exactly what you were hoping for on your schedule. But then also, yeah, I mean, each year I graduate a new class. I had another extra year with you. So then I did the previous class. So last year's class, I only had about a year and a half with. So you guys are a little more specialer to me, and I knew you a little longer. And John, you threatened to live on our sofa many years ago in our MC when you were in middle school. So we got some deeper connections with you guys. So I from the bottom of my heart, I love you guys. I'm grateful for the time we had. And I'm super excited to see what God does in and through you guys going forward. So I'll miss you.
It's not over yet. You don't have to say that.
Did get our goodie bags?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Where are our goodie bags?
Goodbye, goodie bags.
You're writing us off.
The senior packs.
It's only
the dorm packs. Well, since you guys are going to your dorms, I figured I don't need to give you that.
You do not know that yet.
I'm gonna leave.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna hang up now for the sake of the video.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.